It's Tuesday, January 7th, 2025.
Welcome to CBS Mornings Plus.
Record-breaking winter weather causes chaos from the Midwest down to the Southeast, and more dangerous weather is on the way.
Our entire little street, just like no one's on it. It's like, good, everyone in our neighborhood has common sense.
Award-winning chef Alexander Smalls is an expert when it comes to hosting dinner parties, but today he'll be a guest at our table to talk about his new children's book.
Former President Jimmy Carter worked for decades on global public health issues. Our Dr. John LaPook will take a look back at his lasting legacy.
The scale of the numbers of people who've been impacted is very, very remarkable.
When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it.
Nearly 4 years ago, Amanda Gorman moved the nation with her poem at President Biden's inauguration. She'll join us in studio to talk about her latest project.
For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Welcome to CBS Mornings Plus. She was just on moments ago in the 8 o'clock hour of the first 2 hours of CBS Mornings. We talked about her during the entire break leading up to this moment.
She is incredible. I'm so excited that she's staying to be back with us because it was 4 years ago that she delivered that poem. She was the youngest inaugural poet, but I knew the words as she was saying it because it feels like just yesterday.
Yeah, and delivered is the word for it. I mean, she really stands and delivers. I mean, the performance is incredible. We're going to start with a terrible weather day, though. Big news. Deadly winter weather blasting much of the country. Snow and ice, dangerous road conditions, hundreds of accidents from the Midwest to the East Coast as of yesterday. At least 5 people killed in this massive storm. And the storm is also still wreaking havoc at America's airports. Hundreds of flights already canceled or delayed today. We're going to check in with our Chris Van Cleve in just a moment. But first, we're going to go to Rob Marciano, who is standing in the snow in Washington. Rob, good morning. What are you seeing now?
I see the sunshine finally, Tony. And so this side of my face feels great. This side not so good because the wind chill is still right around 10 degrees. Brutal cold has moved in, but the damage is done as far as the snow is concerned. We'll give you a look at it. A lot of it since more of this than we had since 2019. So it's been nearly 6 years since this kind of snowfall has happened. But I mean, there's the beautiful Washington Monument. It looks terrific. The traffic is flowing on the main roads, but secondary roadways are still snow and slush covered, and they've frozen over. So they canceled school again today, and many of the government offices are shut down. Obviously, this was a huge storm. It spanned yesterday. We had impacts all the way still back to Kentucky, where they had up to 3/4 of an inch of ice falling there. That took down some trees and some power lines. Our crew in Louisville had some video of some spinouts there, so dangerous driving conditions there. In Ohio, just north of Cincinnati, an Ohio State police dash cam showed a car sliding right into a tow truck. I mean, that's frightening there. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Here in D.C., the snowplow situation, we just don't have the fleet that they have in Philly and New York and Boston, so it's just slower to get around, and using all sorts of things to get rid of the snow, including have a snowball fight. There's actually a snowball fight association that they've established since Snowmageddon in 2010, so they do that anytime the snow hits enough to have a fight. And anytime that you can get out and do some cross-country skiing with your dog, that federal employee certainly took advantage of her snow day. All right, hand shoveling, that's required again today, but the cold here is here, so it's going to stick around. Let's talk about that because that really has infiltrated 3/4 of the country. Teens and 20s today for wind chill. That's with the sunshine. And then overnight lows tonight will get well down into the teens and single digits. And then we've got another system that's coming out of Texas. So snow, sleet, and freezing rain in some of the same areas Thursday and Friday and even into the east on Saturday. Not to mention extreme winds across Southern California, high fire danger tonight. So lots going on in the weather department, Tony and Adriana.
So much going on, Rob. Thank you so much. I love you calling out the snowball fights. I had a snowball fight yesterday with my daughter. All right, moving on.
I hope you won.
She got me.
She got
me
you.
good.
Wow,
yeah, and she made me do the snowball for her and give it to her so that she could chuck it to me. All right, the storm is still affecting travelers from the Midwest to the East Coast. Our Chris Van Cleve is still holding it down at Chicago's International Airport, O'Hare. Chris, good morning.
Well, good morning, guys. We are in a better place today than we were yesterday. Nearly 500 canceled flights to start the day today. That's about a third of how many we were talking about 24 hours ago. So airlines are using today to recover, trying to get back on track. We are seeing a lot of cancellations, particularly those first of the morning flights in the areas that were hard hit. Now, we spent a good chunk of yesterday on the ramp here as United's winter weather teams were battling the storm, working nonstop to de-ice about 500 scheduled flights. Chris Pearson was overseeing that operation. Why is ice such a challenge for airlines?
It sticks to everything. The snow sticks, yes, but you can plow the snow, you can shovel the snow. Typically on a normal snow event day, we're using 100 or so gallons per aircraft. Today, we're using triple to quadruple that, which extends the processing time.
What challenging conditions out there yesterday. Temperatures in the 20s, wind chill, ice. It was very cold, certainly. Now, we had about 2,300 canceled flights yesterday, only around 500 so far today. More than 9,000 delays, and that's certainly what you will see with ice and things like that. You'll see delays again today. We're watching weather in Denver as well as winds in the New York City area. The Cincinnati airport is struggling to recover from the weather, the ice in that area, and of course some potential for delays because of the winds out west as well. So still not a great travel day, better than we were yesterday, and we're watching that forecast because there's another winter storm coming by the end of the week, Tony.
Well, it's good news that more planes are taking off today, but you do have to get to the airport somehow, and I heard you had a tough time driving to O'Hare there. What happened?
So, I live in Phoenix. Let's just start with that. So I need to own that. Freezing rain yesterday, got out to the car, covered in a sheet of ice. I'm like, okay, running a little late. Honestly, it's my first day back from vacation. I go to get the ice scraper out of the rental car. There's no ice scraper. So now we're in like survivor mode here. My options were my hotel key, my car key, or a credit card. The hotel key, not a good choice. It broke. The car key I thought would scratch the windshield. So I'm using the corporate card. Also not a good choice. I had to switch to one of the metal credit cards. I'll be requesting new credit cards, but I had a view about like this, but I got here yesterday safely, but it was certainly not the best start to a Monday morning for me.
I was wondering what the point of the metal credit card was. It always seemed pointless to me, but now I know.
Yes.
It's a weapon and or window shield scraper.
Chris Van Cleve, whose middle name is MacGyver.
Yeah,
Good job,
well
Chris.
Chris, thank you very much.
Appreciate
it. I appreciate it. All right, we got to take a turn to a tough story. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden visited New Orleans yesterday. They were there to meet with the families of the 14 people killed in that New Year's Day ramming attack along Bourbon Street. It comes in light of a confidential 2019 report distributed to officials in New Orleans that warned a terrorist attack with a vehicle was, quote, highly possible. They were worried about it. The assessment said the retractable barriers needed to be fixed immediately. Officials say that the bollards, as they're known, that's the barriers alone, would not have stopped the attack, although I don't quite understand how they say that.
Yeah, maybe because they'd be in the street and not on the sidewalk.
They say that it would only stop a vehicle going 10 miles an hour, but if you have multiple bollards
Layers.
over time,
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to obstruct the vehicle's high velocity movement right into people.
Yeah. So many questions still. All right, there are growing concerns about bird flu after the CDC yesterday reported America's first deadly case of the virus in Louisiana. So the first deadly case in the country, and it happened in Louisiana. Here is what we know. The patient, who was older than 65, had underlying medical conditions and was hospitalized last month with severe respiratory symptoms. That person was sickened after being exposed to infected birds and their backyard or a backyard poultry flock. In fact, CDC testing found that they were infected by the same strain of the virus that's circulating in wild birds. And this is important, scientists say the virus found in the patient did have some potentially worrying mutations that might help the virus infect people more easily. But Louisiana health officials say there is still no evidence of human-to-human transmission, no additional cases in the state. The CDC says that the current risk posed by bird flu remains low for the general public.
Good news.
Yeah. All right, now in the Middle East, talks are continuing in Qatar to try to cement a ceasefire and hostage deal hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas. The Biden administration is pushing for an agreement to be reached before President-elect Trump takes office. Yesterday, a leaked list appeared to show the names of 34 Israeli hostages to be returned by Hamas as part of a deal. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denied that Hamas has provided any such list. Ramy Inocencio is in the Israeli-occupied West Bank with more. Ramy, good morning.
Adriana, yeah, good morning there. And the sticking point, it appears, is whether those 34 hostages on that Hamas list are alive or dead. And this is coming from Israeli, Hamas, and Qatari officials. Israel's government wants guarantees that they're alive. But, you know, after 15 months of war that really has shattered much of the Strip, with bombings happening each day and with about 300 killed just in the first week of this year alone, one Hamas official claimed that no one knows the condition of all of the hostages, and so they're demanding a 4-day truce to try and figure that out. Meanwhile, families and friends of hostage victims are demanding that Israel agree to a deal to get all of the hostages out at the same time. But if a ceasefire did happen, the first phase would involve what we understand a swap of hostages for Palestinians held in Israeli prisons, along with then a surge in humanitarian aid into Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Seoul on Monday, though, said that he's confident a deal will happen, even if it happens after the end of the Biden administration, which we know is just 13 days from now. But another major hurdle is Hamas's demand that Israel withdraw from Gaza, Adriana, and that has been a red line that Israel so far has not compromised on, and many say they will not going ahead in the future.
Ramy, thank you so much. Still ahead, the Surgeon General wants to put cancer warning labels on alcohol. We are taking a look at how effective those labels could be. Plus, Amanda Gorman joins us in studio to talk about her new children's book and the lessons she wants to teach young girls. Stick around.
What in the world are we going to do about alcohol? Because at this point, I am utterly confused. On the one hand, you've got the World Health Organization telling us that all booze is dangerous. There is no safe amount. But now you've got also the U.S. Surgeon General putting a cancer warning label on alcohol, on all of it. Right there on the bottle, right there on the can, cancer. The message, just one drink a day and your chances of cancer go up. Okay, but what's the research say? Well, we just got a dignified new report this very month from the U.S. National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And guess what? Yes, they found a cancer risk, but they also found that drinking a moderate amount of alcohol actually lowers your risk of dying. So there's like a not dying benefit compared to not drinking at all. So what I think this means generally is that America continues to be absolutely, totally confused when it comes to alcohol. And by the way, this has always been the case. The country was founded by absolute, total luscious. This is a real bar tab, by the way, from the founding fathers. 55 people, George Washington among them. One night in mid-September 1787, a heady time, they were working on the Constitution. They had 60 bottles of claret, 54 bottles of Madeira, 22 bottles of porter, 12 bottles of beer, and 8 bottles of whiskey. Oh, and for good measure, 7 large bowls of punch. That's just 55 people, folks.
Is that real?
That's real. That's a genuine bar tab from the founding fathers. And then that country that they founded decided at one point, not too long ago, to update the Constitution they wrote and ban alcohol entirely, but then repeal it, and then put age limits on drinking, but then change the age limits, and now maybe a cancer warning label? Alcohol and human beings have been working together to great benefit for at least 10,000 years, but we would have figured out at this point, is it good or is it bad, terrible or great, or somewhere in between? I'm so confused.
That was delightful. Thank you for that, Tony. You're right, it's very, very confusing, and we have a researcher who can clear it all up for us. Priscilla Martinez, she's the Deputy Scientific Director of the Alcohol Research Group, which studies drinking patterns and their effect. Priscilla, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Tony just laid it out. There are bits of research that seem contradictory. You know, let's talk about that National Academies research that found that alcohol may extend your life, but we now know that there is a cancer risk. How do people square that? What should they do with that information based on your research?
Well, there are some important differences between what the NASEM report found and what the Surgeon General is saying. So the NASEM report, as you noted, reported that moderate drinking is associated with a lower risk of dying from any cause. So this is about things that are related to alcohol and things that are not related to alcohol. The Surgeon General's report, on the other hand, looked at the body of evidence about alcohol increasing the risk of developing cancer, an alcohol-related cancer. So these are two different things that we're looking at. Another important thing to remember is that the NASEM report had very strict criteria for what studies it included in its report. It only looked at studies over the last 15 years, and it only looked at studies that compared drinkers to people who have never had a drink in your life. And when you apply that kind of stringent criteria, you end up limiting the research that you look at. So the Surgeon General's report, on the other hand, looked at the whole body of research that we have been accumulating for decades about alcohol and cancer. And that's partly why there's this discrepancy between what you hear is coming out from the NASEM report and what the Surgeon General is recommending.
But Priscilla, if out here in trying to live land, I don't care about cancer in particular. I care about living versus dying. And if this other report seems to suggest people who drink moderately, so within reason, within control, are less likely to die in any given year than people who don't drink at all, that seems like they should put a health benefit label on the bottle.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that, Tony, because the outcome that NASEM looked at, the risk of dying from anything, is very different than the risk of dying from something related to cancer, right? So they looked at the risk of dying from things that have nothing to do with cancer or nothing to do with alcohol. But when you're thinking about whether or not to drink, you care about what that thing is going to cause you to die from.
So the reason I wanted to jump in is because you're totally right, and you're making a very smart distinction. But I think what's confusing out here for regular folks like me is, what's the bottom line recommendation for alcohol? Can we have some from time to time or not?
The risk of dying or developing disease from using alcohol is pretty low at moderate levels of use. We might need to reconsider what we mean by moderate drinking, but the risk for developing cancer goes up from your baseline risk from about 1% if you're not drinking every day, and when you do drink, if you're only having 1 to 2 drinks a time. And of course, alcohol is a part of our society, it's a part of our culture and traditions, and it improves people's lives in a way, and so they need to know what the risks are in engaging in this really common behavior, and that's what alcohol warning labels and discussions like this are about, making sure that the American public has the information that they deserve to make informed decisions about their drinking.
A 1% increase in risk in developing cancer. Did I hear that right, Priscilla?
Yes, that's based on, I'm thinking about alcohol and breast cancer in particular because that's what I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. But if you are drinking about 1 drink a day, your risk of developing breast cancer is just about 12% because you're a woman, you were born a woman, and it goes up to about 13% if you're drinking about 1 drink a day on average.
On average. Thank you so much.
So it's not huge,
but it's something, and it's going up.
But it's notable.
But, and talking about what moderate is and how it's important to be moderate, also very important. All right, we'll see if these warning labels happen. They happened in tobacco, had a huge impact there. But we are out of time for now, Priscilla. Thank you so much. All right, ahead, a look back at Jimmy Carter's global health legacy, what the former president told our Dr. John LaPook. That's next.
We're back. Welcome back to CBS Mornings Plus. We're going to talk about a couple stories that caught our eye, beginning with the Minneapolis City Council, which has agreed to let the federal government change that city's police training and use of force policies following the killing of George Floyd in 2020. A former Minneapolis police officer is in prison for choking Floyd to death, you will recall. Now, the agreement follows a 2-year Justice Department investigation that found that officers used excessive force and violated people's rights in other cases as well. And the new agreement says police must use the lowest level of force needed to ensure their safety when making an arrest. Would have thought that was already the case. Officers will be required to intervene as well when they see another officer break the department's rules, and police can no longer put children under the age of 14 in cuffs. The Minneapolis police will also be under long-term court supervision.
All right, 11 men who have spent 2 decades without charge at the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, are now being transferred. This is part of the Biden administration's push in its final days to continue to reduce the number of detainees held in Guantanamo. The 11 Yemeni men were transferred to the custody of the country of Oman. All of the men were approved for transfer in 2023, but the transfer was halted after the Hamas attack on Israel, according to a 2024 NBC News report. Currently, 15 men are still being held at Guantanamo Bay. This includes Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 other men who are charged with being co-conspirators in the 9/11 attack. 6 of the 15 are being held without charge.
Also this morning, former President Jimmy Carter leaving the Carter Center in Atlanta for a final time. His remains have been lying there in repose, and he will soon be moved to Washington, the remains that is, where a series of ceremonies will be held. People of all ages and backgrounds walk through the hallways of the Carter Center, which tells the story of the former president. His casket there, you see it on your screen, draped in an American flag under the constant watch of a military honor guard. And in Washington, Carter will lie in state at the nation's capital through Thursday morning before his state funeral at the National Cathedral. All living former presidents are expected to attend.
Now let's try to make you smile a bit. Check out Bao Li and Qingbao enjoying their first official snow day in Washington, D.C. on Monday. Look at that roll, ladies and gentlemen. The National Zoo's newest and cutest duo had the time of their lives rolling around, somersaulting and frolicking in the fresh powder. The giant pandas, who arrived in the U.S. from China back in October, are set to make their official public debut later this month. So for now, you can't go see the pandas, but thank goodness the Smithsonian National Zoo is releasing this video. Shout out to our senior producer in Washington, D.C. for sending me this breaking news video yesterday. Thank you, Kate.
Really, really amazing. And I would have been Googling, do pandas like snow, until I saw that footage. Now I know.
What about all of the other amazing pieces of footage of pandas frolicking in snow from the National Zoo?
You've gone deep. That's
No?
the first I've ever seen.
Are you serious? Okay, tomorrow maybe we'll show you a montage of my greatest hits.
Okay.
I love the DC pandas, and I love seeing them play in the snow.
What-
This is a thing.
Do they sit around in the summertime when it's too hot, just with like a
They
fan?
do. They're just like this in the zoo. I've seen them. They don't do much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that
they climb
montage
trees.
too.
They're very agile.
I believe that.
Yeah, okay, we'll talk. In today's Health Watch, we are taking a look back at President Jimmy Carter's legacy in the field of global public health. After leaving the White House, Carter worked for decades to eradicate tropical diseases across the world. In Africa, his efforts helped nearly eliminate a devastating infection called guinea worm disease. He also pioneered new approaches to train healthcare workers, distribute medicine, and advocated for better mental health care for all. Our chief medical correspondent, Dr. John LaPook, interviewed the former president in 2007 for CBS Sunday Morning. Here is what he said about the work of his nonprofit, the Carter Center.
When Rosa and I left the White House, we didn't know what we were going to do with our lives, and we have been really blessed by the involvement of the Carter Center. We now have programs in 71 nations on earth. Just a few days ago, I was in Sudan dealing with some of the most horrible problems on earth with a great deal of hope and expectation that in a small way we can join with the phalanx of other well-meaning people and bring about a better life for everybody.
Dr. John LaPook is here. Doctor, good morning.
Morning.
So we've talked ever since, really for years about how Carter's legacy really was, so much happened after his presidency, so much during his presidency, but really after his presidency. And put into context his true impact on global health.
It was enormous. He cared about the little guy, and he used his power to plug holes. So some country needed something, he'd pick up the phone and call the president. The president didn't respond, he'd get on a plane and fly there, and then things started happening. There was a condition called...
Really? He would get on it? He would just
yes, he
like...
would just boom, and then he walked into the room and go, okay, we're going to do that. River blindness, big condition, and Merck very generously donated the drug, ivermectin, to take care of it forever, for free. But they couldn't get it the last mile to the villages. Carter Center stepped in. When Bill and Melinda Gates were starting their foundation, they turned to President Carter and said, can you help us figure out how to deal with tropical illnesses? And he gave them advice. And then, of course, you heard about guinea worm and helping to eradicate that.
So it's difficult work, also very rewarding work. And you talked to President Carter about both those subjects. Take a look at the answer.
When we started with guinea worm, quite often the witch doctors there who were looked upon, they were the actual doctors, didn't want us to interfere in the local water holes where the guinea worm eggs were breeding, and the people were drinking the water, and a year later they had a worm in their body 30 inches long. It took 30 days to emerge. And so we had to convince the villagers to ignore the witch doctors, at least in this case, and let us correct the problem. We didn't correct the problem. We taught the villagers how to correct their own problem. There are many people on earth that are suffering completely unnecessarily. And just with a small amount of attention and generosity with our time or with our money, we can alleviate their suffering. What you invest in improving those lives will pay you much richer dividends than what you put into it. You get more out of it than what you put into it.
Like all things.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So how did do you happen to know how he settled on this lifelong effort to just alleviate suffering? It's so simple, so beautiful, and so successful.
Well, you know, it reflected the decency of the man. I mean, that really came across. I got to spend a half hour with him. They were going to give us 10 minutes, then it went to 30 minutes. And that really came across. And in terms of the guinea worm and the use of power, in 1995, he brokered, there was, of course, a civil war in Sudan, and he brokered the guinea worm ceasefire for 6 months.
Really?
Which was amazing. And then he used his power to do that. And then they were able to come in, clean up the water, which was the main problem. And in 1986, there were 3.5 million cases of guinea worm, very painful disease. And at last count, in November of 2024, 11.
Wow. So, Dr. LeBouc, you had time with him in the room. What surprised you? What stood out to you about being with him?
What really came across was his sense of decency. You know how you look at somebody and you can tell he was an intent listener, very curious, very detail-oriented. When I came in, he was reeling off the names of things. You know this, we're dealing with schistosomiasis and trachoma and guinea worm disease, and I said, is this guy a doctor? But he's known for that, doing the deep dive, and then he would come up and he would really have a sense of mastery. But really, his sense of decency, his caring about the little guy, and you know, what a pleasure and an honor to meet him. And I have to say, last night I looked at the whole 30-minute interview and it was like, wow.
Yeah, yeah. The smile as well. One of the buttons when he was running for office was the grin will win.
Oh,
the grin did win in the end. Yeah.
So good.
Dr. LeBouc, thank you very much. Appreciate it. A lovely shot of Carter's smile there. Ahead, chef and author Alexander Smalls is here to tell us what inspired his new children's book. It's all about food. Make it a dish for Dad. That's coming up on CBS Mornings Plus. Our next guest is Chef Alexander Smalls, who has been on a mission to, quote, change the way we eat. Smalls is an acclaimed restaurateur and the winner of the coveted James Beard Award for recipes inspired by his childhood in South Carolina. A lot of good eating there. His new children's book is fantastic, and it's titled When Alexander Graced the Table. Smalls calls it an ode to Sunday dinner and a celebration of food for all ages. A fictional young Alexander's favorite meal is Sunday dinner. With some encouragement from his mom, Alexander finally contributes to the family meal with a homemade lemon icebox pie. Alexander Smalls joins us now. So we say the Alexander is fictional, but the making a pie for the family is something you actually did when you were Alexander's name.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, this is a true story. You know, it is what I did.
So it's not fictional. It's a true story then.
Yeah,
I love it.
Very much so.
And I've already been eating the pie.
So, okay, Tony has already eaten half the pie. This looks like Gail's coconut custard pie right now. It's half gone. He couldn't even wait for the segment to start. Alexander, love the book. I read it to my daughter, and
nice.
we loved it together.
Thank you.
It's the story of this Sunday dinner tradition, and you always being involved in the cooking, loving the cooking, and wanting to make your father's favorite pie for him.
Yeah.
And then the big moment, does he like it, does he not? We won't reveal that, ladies and gentlemen. You have to read the book. But tell us about how this is based on your life. You know, your first meal, it says here you wanted Franks and beans.
Oh, I loved
And
the hot dogs as a kid. Are you kidding?
And your mother said, I've been cooking all day, you go make it. And you did. Was that the first meal that you made?
Well, you know, my mother's whole thing about food and me, our relationship was that I wanted the same thing over and over again. If I liked something, I wanted it. Potato salad, I wanted it every Sunday. Her way of dealing with me is make it yourself. Learn to make it yourself. And I loved spending time with my mother in the kitchen, cooking and being at her side, listening to her stories. And so it was just a tradition. It was a way of being loved and being her favorite. I hope my sisters are listening.
Well, I mean, people should know that you get a children's book out of this. You also get a recipe in the back for the lemon icebox pie, which is, we're eating a version of it. Meringue doesn't travel, so you made this with a modification.
Yes.
But it's fantastic, and the whipped cream on the top is just delightful.
What's the best thing about this pie really is the crust. And this is when you bring your children in and get them involved in the whole process, because it's like working with clay. I mean, literally, I remember the first time I made the crust, my mother used to put down a layer of wax paper and graham cracker wafers, and then a layer over, and then I take the rolling pin and bang, 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 roll it over, smash, smash. I mean, kids love that. Now I do it with my hand.
You still remember the movement.
Oh,
It's
yes.
amazing. It also captures really a tradition that I don't know is really alive as much anymore, that Sunday family dinner. Everyone is involved in the cooking. You talk about learning from your mother, the courage to cook yourself. Your grandfather, patience to let, you know, the fruits and vegetables grow in your garden. Is this a tradition that's being lost?
Oh, without question. I mean, well, first of all, people don't live with any land, but also people don't live with extended families the way that we used to. When I grew up, you know, my yard was like a pyramid. At each corner, my grandfather and grandmother, my parents, and then my Uncle Joseph. And in the middle of that was a huge garden that we all worked in the garden and spent lots of time there. So we understood where our food came from, and we also understood that what kept the family together was food preparation and meals that we shared.
So speaking of
you can ask the same
meals,
question
okay.
Yeah.
So apparently you throw some pretty epic dinner parties. Eater says you throw some of the city's most mythologized dinner parties, positioning you as the grandfather of New York's Black culture.
Oh my.
Yes, right? So, chef and opera singer, we didn't even get to that, but we don't have time for the fact that you're a Tony and Grammy Award winner. Chef, what makes a good dinner party?
Well, people don't host anymore. You have to understand what your responsibility is to your guests. What you're hosting, you have to be in every part of their experience. First and foremost, they come to you and they say, here I am. They bring their bottle of wine or whatever. Everybody brings me bourbon, because that's a bourbon household. And, you know, they are there for an experience, and that's my opportunity. I opened my first restaurant because somebody else, A, needed to pay for dinner, but 2, I wanted to take my living room public. I mean, literally, I couldn't stop giving parties. And so I said, well, I need a restaurant. So 30-some years ago, you know, I opened my first restaurant because I wanted to host people. And that's the key. You have to have really great food and lots of it. You can't run out of anything. And you have to be engaged with your guests and make sure they are engaged with each other.
I love that. I love chefs. You can see, chefs have the best personalities,
I know,
the best
they really
stories,
do.
and they bring the pie is gone. That is in one segment. That's
We're looking forward to attending your next dinner party, Chef. You just let us know.
I'm not gonna lick the plate on camera, but I will in the commercial. Alexander Smalls, thank you very much. The book is When Alexander Graced the Table. It is a true story, ladies and gentlemen. It's available today.
Ahead, another book your kids might love. The very talented, that's putting it lightly, Amanda Gorman is here to tell us about her new children's book, Girls on the Rise. We'll be right back. There it is. Hi, Amanda.
We'll dream, soar into the blue, rise up to a new reality, because defending the good is how we defy gravity.
Just when you think you couldn't get more Wicked content that you love, there it is, folks. That was Amanda Gorman's Wicked-inspired poem, Do Us Good. Since appearing at President Biden's inauguration 4 years ago, Gorman's star continues to rise. And she has a new children's book called Girls on the Rise, reminding everyone that girls are powerful rock stars, especially when they work together. Amanda Gorman joins us now. Good morning. I love this book.
Thank you.
There's so many lines that I just like, just loved. And the girls are all together in all of the scenes, I noticed. But what was it that inspired you to make this for girls? Because this is based on your poem, We Rise, which was for women.
Exactly. So a few years ago, I wrote a poem called We Rise. It was really kind of spawning out of the Time's Up Me Too movement. And I wanted to have a children's book that made gender power, feminism safe to talk about with young girls. And also, I'd love young boys to read this, non-binary kids as well. So I really wanted a children's book that could speak to a young audience about really important things.
And you've written poems for the Super Bowl. We mentioned the inaugural. You did something for CBS even before you were super famous. We're proud of that. But you say it was actually really complicated and a challenge, even on top of all the things you've already done, to do a poem for kids in a book form. Why?
Absolutely, you're so right. CBS is an early home for me, so I love you guys for that. And as for kids' books, it can be very difficult because there's this instinct to try to dumb things down for kids, but kids come with such a clarity of themselves that we underestimate. They know right from wrong, they know fair from not, and they also have so many inquiries about the world. So when you write a children's book, it's all about speaking from the heart in the most direct and caring way possible.
But it's also an enjoyable experience for the parent.
Yes.
When I was reading this, I was enjoying the turns that you took, the things, the devices you used to make this interesting. Here's one. We are not beautiful. Not because of, we are beautiful, not because of how we may appear, but how we look, right? You think it's gonna go in a certain way, and then you take a turn straight into the face of fear.
Yes.
I love that.
Thank you.
So for you, there's so many lines here about the collective. You also say, when one girl shows up, she's never alone. When, we all win when one girl tries, not even when she wins. Why was it so important to you to make this about the collective?
I think so often in children's books, we follow individual characters or people. And I think it's a really important message to teach young children early the importance of being a member of a community, especially if you're part of a marginalized group, say a girl, that there is so much power and strength that comes with standing together. And I know now more than ever can feel incredibly divisive. And the more that we can speak to young children about unity, the more the next generation will have solidarity, just be part of their culture.
You've talked openly about wanting to go into politics, up to and including president, but maybe LA mayor first or Congress, you name it. And people like Hillary Clinton, Michelle Obama, they're fans of yours. Have they given you advice for politics?
Absolutely. They've all been so supportive. I would say I was having a conversation with Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi, and something they mentioned to me was never forget the iron fist in the velvet glove.
I thought you were going to say, never do this. Politics is awful.
You know what? Maybe secretly they're thinking that, but I think in the conversation, like, we know how hard this is, but we know you can take it forward.
Wow.
And I loved that advice because it was thinking about power in the iron fist, but think about tact, think about compassion.
All of the soft.
All of the softness.
Exactly. Amanda Gorman, thank you so much. The book is Girls on the Rise. It's on sale now. That does it for us. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
On CBS Mornings Plus.
See ya.
Thanks, Amanda.